It's like Republicans are trying to defuse a bomb and they don't know which wire to cut right now.
Have you ever seen that head explode emoji? You ever wish that it would come to life? It nearly did this past week when Donald Trump was presented with normal questions.
I hope that Jill and Joe Biden spend all of October in every Barnes & Noble in every swing district.
It's Political Rehab, where PTI meets The Daily Show this week. Inflation spikes, and the president loves it. Spooks against us, Trump temper tantrum, California screaming, Jill Biden's summer reading list, and then a deep dive on the unholy nexus of sports, huge money, and a certain White House redecorator. Lots to talk about. Let's get right into our rundown. This week, the economic cost of Trump's Iran war moved from abstract to painfully concrete. The CPI, that's our basic inflation measure, hit 4.2%, the highest in 3 years. And Trump responded in the Oval Office by saying, "I love the inflation." No, seriously, that's what he said. At the same time, Iran downed a U.S. Army Apache near the Strait of Hormuz. Trump said the U.S. must respond, and oil prices pushed even higher, meaning the war, inflation, and midterm politics are now fully fused. Matt, it feels like this is the story that just keeps going and going. Is there any end in sight?
You know what else Trump is going to end up loving? He's going to have to end up loving losing, and he's going to have to love being impeached again. He's going to have to love giving Hakeem Jeffries the gavel, because losing is going to happen after that bonehead remark of "I love the inflation." Look, my problem here is not the bombing and the new escalations. They shot down a helicopter. They're trying to kill American soldiers. My problem is that Trump keeps trying to say there's a peace deal any day. My problem is Trump keeps gaslighting the American people with stories of Iran that is decimated. And with our own two eyes, we see something else. Iran is a threat. Trump started this war. I say finish the job and end the war. Stop playing commander in chief and start actually doing something to solve the mess that you created. Because right now, Iran is a never-ending story. American lives are at risk. The world economy is on the brink. Gas prices and inflation are threatening to cripple Americans.
We've already covered on this show and on my live stream the fact that there is a huge price bomb waiting us in 6 months as the prices of key commodities that have been strangled off, the supply chains have been strangled off through the Strait of Hormuz, keep escalating as we run down critical inventories. The key thing for people to remember here is this is going to happen whether we unlock the Strait of Hormuz or not. I was on Bloomberg News yesterday, and the guest before me was former Ambassador Nikki Haley. They asked her about the path forward, and she said, "Oh, I think the president's made the right move, and I think the next move is to get a hold of Karg Island, the major refining site for the Iranians, and choke off their economic inflow of dollars." And they asked me what I thought, and I tried to be very polite because I do defer to the expertise of the ambassador, but there is no way. Both chambers of Congress have passed a resolution clawing back war powers from President Trump. There's no way they're going to agree to boots on the ground. There's no path forward here that involves escalation. The only thing that Trump can do, the only card he really has to play, is to try to find some face-saving way out, because the economic consequences are going to land increasingly on Americans, and it's going to absolutely decimate your party in the midterms.
So this week, we had another expose in the New York Times. Now, I know for all my Republican friends, you're like, it's the New York Times, you want to dismiss it. But Donald Trump promised to expose the deep state. But now he's using the FBI, the DOJ, and intelligence communities to try and prove it existed. And the New York Times investigation details how Trump allies pushed prosecutors to pursue a sweeping conspiracy case against former intelligence and law enforcement officials. This whole intelligence weaponization seems to be coming to a brink. What do you make of it?
I've worked for several members of Congress, and I can tell you that even if this president and this administration does not take our intelligence services seriously, and they don't take the ultimate mission of protecting America through our intelligence services seriously. Members of Congress from both parties do. I've spoken with many times Republicans and Democrats in Congress, and they do not kid around about this stuff. There is a lack of seriousness about the mission here. And what you're seeing with all of the departures, the expose, the New York Times, all of the pushback is you can call it a deep state. It's not. These are professionals. These are people who have dedicated their professional lives, their service to our country. Don't call them a deep state. These people are trying to defend their mission. There are antibodies at work. And the ultimate thing that's really sad about all of this is we were worried when Trump came back into office that he was going to fire everybody. He tried. He did do a lot of firings. But the other effect is he's making it so unpleasant. He's degrading the mission of these professionals so profoundly that they can't bear to stay. And so as they leave, there are fewer and fewer people who actually care, who actually want to uphold the law, left to defend the system. If anything, the situation is getting more dangerous.
Yeah, and I think the other issue that everybody needs to pay attention to here is that he is slowly degrading the trust in institutions. And you're slowly degrading the trust in that intelligence, and you're slowly degrading the trust on what the Department of Justice and FBI and DNI should be at this point in time. Now, there's another report that showed up in Politico that says Trump is growing increasingly pissed with the Senate and with people out there pushing back at him. And so he is putting in people that are not qualified because they're loyalists, and that just helps complete this cycle of distrust that we talked about.
Hey, Matt, have you ever seen that head explode emoji? You ever wish that it would come to life? It nearly did this past week when Donald Trump was presented with normal questions in the course of an interview with Meet the Press, from which he walked out, stormed out, head exploded his way out. After host Kristen Welker pressed him on false claims about January 6th and his claims about rigged elections, it's not just a media spat. It's part of a larger pattern where Trump treats basic factual challenge as betrayal, as some kind of an affront to him, as some kind of an attack. And his allies immediately turn that fragility into yet another attack on the press because they've got to defend the guy. Matt, I'm not the biggest fan of Kristen Welker, but doing normal journalism, right?
It looked like his head was exploding. And then the patronizing, "We're done, dear." It was just across the line.
He didn't call her piggy. He's improving.
That is true. He is getting better with how he patronizes people. But what's going on here is it is all part of this pattern of taking away institutions so he can try and create whatever alternative reality he wants to. And when people challenge him on that alternative reality, there's only one logical conclusion, is that you must be lying. This must be a setup like clockwork. I saw people like Sean Spicer, who says, "Let's CBS, NBC." And I saw Megyn Kelly defending him, walking out with things like, "You got to give a little leeway to the president because bullshit." You're asking him legitimate questions about things. He is the president of the United States. He should be able to handle basic questions. And the fact that he continues to act like a petulant little child just shows why we have all these problems. But that is not the whole story, because it is part of his attempt to discredit institutions. It is a tactic that he is going to continue to use.
I would like to connect the dot to the discussion we had last week about whether Trump really does have a grasp on reality anymore. We presented all kinds of evidence that I'm not going to rehash because I want people to watch that actual episode about the fact that he's living in a bubble. We're not sure if he really understands. When he says something like, "Oh, I love the inflation," I'm not sure he actually knows what the situation is. When he talks about the prospects of a deal with Iran, it's unclear whether he really has a grasp on the state of the negotiations, what's actually happening in the war. I think there's a very fair interpretation of this interview and this storm out that he was genuinely shocked. He was genuinely surprised to be presented with any counterfactuals, any challenge to his invented notion of rigging and vote chicanery. I think he was genuinely shocked and befuddled and confused. I'm not a doctor. I'm just reading what's on his face.
And one of those things that set off this temper tantrum was the California primary, where Trump started calling it rigged and he was pressed on evidence. Now, I don't know why you would just rig a mayor's race instead of the entire state. There's no real surprise in a city where the GOP registration's, I think, 18, almost 19%, that the Republican MAGA candidate was going to come in last. That should not shock anybody here. And it is certainly not a sign that things are rigged. To me, this sounds like a preview of a playbook we're going to see in November. What do you think, Matt?
Of course, it's a playbook we're going to see in November. Look, Democrats have run the machinery in California for decades. Come on, guys. You've got to count faster. We're at a point politically and culturally where certain things we just can't joke about. I'm not talking about woke humor and cancellation. I'm talking about the fact that it just feeds into these kinds of narratives when it takes you 5-6 days to count, and it just opens the door. I made the same analogy about the Ig Nobel Awards. It's a group of scientists at a magazine who award funny, satirical awards for science that sounds funny. And I'm like, guys, you can't afford to do this anymore. You can't make fun of science because the people in Congress who don't get the joke are going to use it as an excuse to shut down American science. You can't take this long to count because Trump is going to jump all over it and invent some new conspiracy theory. Of course, he's going to do the same thing with the midterm elections. I'm not victim blaming here. I'm just saying that Democrats, people who actually care about fair American elections, that includes an awful lot of Republicans, we have to present a more limited target and clean up our act a little bit, because we know that Trump is going to drive a truck through any opening that he gets.
Look, election integrity is key. The thing is, we need to know that the outcomes are right, they're safe, they're secure. And when it does take that long, it does create an opening. Because I am already hearing the playbook for this year is, and you see it right now, Republican and Trump allies are saying, we're going to win the midterms. They're showing me maps. They're showing me revised Cook stuff. It's not going to happen. But what it does is it sets up that dynamic that when we lose, there must be some other excuse. It also becomes a fundraising machine for Trump from day one. And this becomes Exhibit A. When California takes this long, it becomes the basis and the proof that later what is happening when we do lose is probably because of some sort of fraud.
Matt, my father once told me about Madagascar syndrome. That's where you have an awkward tryst with someone, and the next day you're like, oh, would you maybe go away somewhere like, how about Madagascar? That's the way the entire Democratic Party felt about Jill Biden's new book. She's on tour and is reopening Democratic questions about Joe Biden and 2024. Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's new reporting on Trump and Epstein also shows a White House consumed by panic. That's a book that Democrats are welcoming. But I want to focus on the Bidens. This is a painful chapter. I have made the case before in my writing, and I'll stand by it, that the first 2 years of Joe Biden's presidency, we know this by the numbers, it was one of the most productive legislatively in the history of America, certainly in the last 100 years. And a lot of that legislation was bipartisan. The CHIPS Act, investing in infrastructure, some of the steps that Republicans and Democrats agreed we needed to save the country economically in the wake of COVID. And so he has a legacy that he can be proud of. And then there was the last 2 years that didn't go so well. Are Republicans really seeing this as an opportunity to reopen these old wounds, relitigate 2024? Is this going to help Republicans at all in this year's midterms?
I hope that Jill and Joe Biden spend all of October in every Barnes and Noble in every swing district. Biden is the person we get to run against. Trump keeps trying it. I think the American people are tired of it, but I think it hurts Democrats when he starts to show up again. You also have Jill Biden saying things like, oh, I thought maybe he was having a stroke during that debate. This idea that she never saw him that bad when all of America saw him that bad. So I think the more the Biden show up, the more it's going to hurt Democrats. But if we're being honest here, the New York Times book pulls Epstein back into this conversation. It's like Republicans are trying to defuse a bomb and they don't know which wire to cut right now. you still have the economy. And so as much as the Biden books and Biden showing up again is going to remind people that Democratic Party lost, the reality is their pocketbook, their checking account, their bank account are going to play a bigger role in it. It's going to be Biden, go away, stop talking. Trump, you're even worse right now. And I think that's the danger for Republicans, is looking at Biden through a lens that may actually give him a little more credibility given everything that's happening in the world today with Trump. Inflation's
Well,
up, it's been in 4 years.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. All I'll say on the Biden angle is that it's an odd quirk of psychology in the U.S. that we love our presidents to go away and
Yes.
do something else. Jimmy Carter wrote the playbook for here's how you have a successful post-presidency. You go do something else that's meaningful. People love to see you over there. People even don't mind George W. going off and painting. Oh, you've got a project? Great. We're really happy with you. Obama, when has he had a misstep? When he did that podcast with Bruce Springsteen, no one wanted to hear it. No one wanted to see it. We love to see you pop up at the NBA All-Star game. We can cheer you. That's great. We love you. Now go back over there. This is so well known. It's such a well-documented dynamic in American voter psychology. For Jill Biden, for the Bidens, for the advisors around them, not to be aware of that and to time a memoir like this, a self-serving memoir like this, for right now, it's tone deaf, it's selfish. And I wish they would just go thrive, live your lives, do something else. It's the price you pay for the immense power and prestige you get with the presidency. And on that note, speaking of power and prestige, the World Cup is starting this week. I've been obsessed with it. Watch my live stream for a great deep dive. It's on this channel on everything having to do with the World Cup, the U.S. men's national team. I love it. People are excited. But there's a darker side, a weird nexus between power, prestige, sports, and of course, Donald Trump. And that's what we want to get into in this week's deep dive.
Matt GPT, I have a question. Why does Trump keep showing up at every major sporting event in America?
Donald Trump is turning the White House into a UFC arena. Everyone's covering the clown show. Nobody is saying what it actually is. This is not just a birthday party. This is not just a celebration of America 250. This is a president using the most powerful office in the world as a professional business tool. And if you think this is just about the UFC, you haven't been paying attention. The World Cup, the NBA Finals, professional golf, 16 major sporting events in 16 months. Presidents and sports have always mixed. Taft threw out the first ceremonial pitch in 1910 because a baseball owner thought it'd boost attendance. Nixon was obsessed with sports. He called coaches, suggested plays, and installed a bowling alley in the White House. But Nixon was just a fan. Trump flipped the formula. Someone is always cashing in. Take the NBA Finals. Trump is a genuine Knicks fan, has been his whole life. But the story isn't Trump attending the game, it's the relationship with Knicks owner James Dolan. 3 weeks before tip-off, Trump committed $8 billion to rebuild Penn Station. New train hall, new entrance, expanded capacity. And MSG stays exactly where it is, which is worth a fortune to Dolan. Oh yeah, one more thing. Inside the new renderings, a wall bears the presidential seal of Donald J. Trump. Professional golf is the same story. Trump didn't buy Doral, Turnberry, or Bedminster because he wanted a place to play. He bought them because professional golf turns a course into a brand. A tournament brings television cameras, corporate executives, sponsors, celebrities. It signals prestige in a way no marketing budget can buy. But Trump's golf business became politically toxic. Doral was a PGA Tour stop for 45 straight years. Then Cadillac pulled their sponsorship in 2016. After January 6th, the PGA Championship was pulled from Bedminster. The R&A said Turnberry would not return to the open road. Then Trump wins in 2024, and the PGA Tour came crawling back to Doral the very next year. And every time Trump shows up at a tournament at one of his golf courses, the presidency becomes a marketing tool. The motorcade, the cameras, the coverage. He is using the most powerful office in the world to increase the value of the Trump brand. Which brings us to the UFC, because unlike golf or Madison Square Garden, this one isn't subtle. 25 years ago, the UFC was a pariah. States were banning it. Trump gave them a home. His Atlantic City casinos hosted UFC events when the sport had nowhere else to go. That relationship never went away. Dana White has been by Trump's side through every campaign, and now Trump is paying him back in the only currency that matters at this level: access. And not just any access, the White House lawn, the most recognizable address on the planet, a global pay-per-view audience, a presidential endorsement that no marketing budget in the history of sports could replicate. No president has ever done this, not even close. But nothing compares to the World Cup. FIFA may be the most corrupt organization in the history of modern sports. In 2015, the FBI arrested senior FIFA officials in a Zurich hotel. Millions in bribes, corrupt hosting deal, 12 officials pleading guilty. But they didn't clean it up. They just got a new president. And that president has been to the White House more times than most cabinet members. FIFA expects to extract between 11 and 14 billion from the World Cup. Every dollar of that goes to FIFA. American host cities are on the hook for hundreds of millions in cost: security, stadium upgrades, transportation, fan festivals. And Trump, who went after NATO allies, who tariffed the entire world, who pulled out of every agreement he decided wasn't fair to America, has not said a single word about the fact that a corrupt Swiss nonprofit is about to extract $14 billion from American soil while American taxpayers pick up the bill. Not one word. Because FIFA created a brand new award, the FIFA Peace Prize, and gave the inaugural one to Donald J. Trump. And Trump gets one more thing: a global stage, 4 billion viewers, a trophy to hand out, and a geopolitical weapon he's already using. Which brings us back to why any of this matters. Sports is the last public square, the last place where Americans who hate each other still show up in the same room. And Trump, who understands mass audiences better than any politician alive, has identified them. No, this is not about the UFC on the White House lawn. It's about a president who increasingly treats public office as a private asset.
Every president has basked in the reflected glow of sports heroes. That's as old as the Republic, practically. But what you're saying is that what Trump does is a little bit different.
When I think of presidents in sports, the image in my head is George W. Bush right after 9/11 throwing that strike right after the Yankees game. And that's where sports and politics are at its best. That's when they come together and bring everyone into a place that makes you feel proud and feel like an American. Now, look, I love the fact that presidents show up at sporting. So there's this nexus of pop culture that's already been there, that at the Knicks game all the time with celebrity role. But I think what Trump is doing is slightly different. And there is a darker side of this, because when you look at where he goes, these are more political and business stops than they are America stops. The easy one is you go to NASCAR. And why do you go to NASCAR? Because that's his base. So you rally your base. You get that. That makes sense. That's a political stop. But then when you start to get into things like golf or the UFC, it becomes much, much darker.
I want to go back to your reference to George W. Bush throwing out that first pitch after 9/11. It was the apex for him. May remember, some of our viewers may be a little young for this, but he hit heights of post 9/11 approval rating, popularity that had almost never been seen in American politics before.
Right.
What started the downslide? When he started to turn it to his own political advantage. He started to use it politically weaponized, although it's quaint the way he did it back then compared to what we're seeing now. He tried to weaponize that popularity to drive what became first the Afghanistan war, which we were all united in at the time, and then the Iraq war. And that's where things began to split, and he began to turn it on Democrats. That's not what people want to see, and it's not what people want in their sports. And Trump has turned that twist further and further, because for him, as you said, it's all about his own benefit financially, his own benefit in terms of power, flattery, and prestige. That's a FIFA story, right? You have this very weird contrast where Trump has been on a mission for years to undermine NATO. He claims, oh, it's rigged. We hear that a lot. NATO is rigged. The other countries aren't paying enough. We're getting a bad deal. We're getting a bad bargain. That's exactly what's happening with FIFA right now. America is getting a horrible bargain. FIFA expects to get roughly $13 to $14 billion of revenue out of the World Cup. On our soil, it's likely going to be the richest tournament in history. But unlike back in 1994, the last time we hosted the World Cup, FIFA this time is controlling most of the major revenue streams itself. And localities, cities, states are being left with massive bills, $500 million for New York and New Jersey alone, preparing for the tournament, police and emergency services and everything else that goes with hosting a World Cup site. If Donald Trump cared at all about the kinds of things that he claims to care about when it comes to NATO, he would insist, wait, why are we hosting? Where's our cut? This is what he's about in every other realm of life. Why isn't he doing that? Because Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, gave him a gold statue, gave him a FIFA Peace Prize, gave him the flattery kickback. The UFC, there's not a direct financial tie that I'm aware of, but these are his cronies. These are his friends. Listen, I'm a rare Democrat. I'm a Democrat who actually watches UFC. I know a little something about it. I'm a spectator of the sport. But gosh darn it, these are not saints that he's in bed with here. And these are all his friends going back to his casino hosting days, where he was the only person who would let them do, as you said in your piece, who would let them do their events. And these are his buddies, and he's turning the White House into a circus site. For Trump, he's committing the cardinal sin that we've seen in politics before of you want to bask in approval, you want to bask in the reflected glow of sports glory. For him, he's trying to convert all of that into coin for himself. That's the quintessential difference.
What we do know with UFC is that this gives them a stage like something they've never seen. And what becomes interesting to me, and you just touched on this when you got into the World Cup and FIFA, it's that glory too, that bask in that glow that Trump really gravitates to. And you saw that with the Knicks game where you could see the booze. It was there. But if you looked at social media and the posts from the White House or even his press conference later, they took the side prior to them showing him on stage and heard the USA chants, and the social media narrative was USA chants, everybody loved me, this was great. And so where this nexus of Trump and sports really comes into play is trying to drive that narrative for him, drive that narrative for a friend of his, or as you saw with FIFA, which admittedly, I don't know a ton about this. And so I was fascinated when I saw your stuff this week about that corruption and grift. And it just really does feel like something Trump should be jumping all over, but just is not, because he wants to have that trophy and he will literally use sports as another weapon for himself.
I want to close on this. It's an interesting quirk of history that if Fidel Castro had been able to throw a slightly faster fastball, we might not have had the last 60 years in the Western Hemisphere. He was a failed baseball pitcher. He didn't make it, so he went into politics. Donald Trump tried to get involved in owning an NFL team. He didn't quite make it. And here we are. It's just like a fascinating sliding doors moment. This is a guy who I think wants the glory of being in sports, that kind of thing that he himself can never achieve. And so all he wants out of it is his cut. And he's going to use all of the power and prestige of the presidency to get it. But that's a really dour note, especially when it comes as delightful as sports. So let's turn to this week's Dose of Hope.
I attended the premiere of a friend of mine's documentary called Chris and Martina, The Final Set at the Tribeca Film Fest. Now, if you're a tennis fan, you already know this story. I didn't. Tennis has never really been my thing. In fact, I struggle with all racket sports. Tennis, pickleball, ping pong. As a golfer, my brain sees a ball and immediately tries to hit it 300 yards. So I walked into this theater with only a basic understanding of Chris Everett and Martina Navratilova. And I have to tell you, the film is fantastic. It's amazing. And you can catch it on Netflix later this month and see it for yourself. It's all about the greatest rivalry in sports history. These two spent years trying to beat each other. They spent years trying to take trophies away from each other. They pushed each other. They challenged each other. They made each other better. And during the panel discussion afterwards, they were even trying to one-up each other. You can see the competitive fire is still there. But what makes the documentary special isn't the rivalry, it's the friendship. Over the years, they went through marriages, divorces, family struggles, and eventually cancer. Both women face serious cancer diagnoses, and both women are cancer-free today. And throughout it all, they were there for each other. And watching the film reminded me of something that we've lost sight of. Competition and hatred are not the same thing. You can want to beat somebody without wanting to destroy them. You can disagree with somebody without believing they're evil. You can spend all day battling and still respect the person on the other side. And that's what sportsmanship really is. And honestly, it's what politics is for a lot of us. Politics has never been a gentleman's game. We're not sitting around a campfire singing kumbaya. We look at politics as a blood sport. We want to beat our opponents. We want to expose their weakness, and we will do almost anything to win. But we also have an understanding. It's still a game. No different than tennis, no different than football or golf. The competition is real, the rivalry is real, but your opponent isn't your enemy. They're just your opponent. Because at the end of the day, most of us are fighting for the same thing. We want a safer country, a stronger economy, more opportunities for our kids. We just have very different ideas about how to get there. And so watching Chris and Martina reminded me of something I think many have forgotten. Competition doesn't require hatred. In fact, some of the greatest rivalries in history are built on respect. And that's true in sports, and it should be true in politics too.
I'm going to pick up on the exact same theme with the start of the World Cup this week. And longtime listeners know how much I love the U.S. men's national team. I did an entire episode in the live stream earlier this week with the author of a fascinating history of the USMNT, but I'm not going to belabor that. In fact, I'm not going to talk about the success of the USMNT at all. I'm going to talk about, can we win even if we lose? One of the underrated things about the World Cup is that you don't just get to watch our team, we get to experience everybody else's joy. It's like we're hosting a party and we're opening up our doors to all kinds of neighbors and people down the street and people we may have never met before. They're going to come into our house and they are going to absolutely live it up. We're going to see Argentina celebrate, Morocco, Japan, Mexico. They are all going to go to town on our soil. And even if we have the disappointment of the U.S. failing to make a deep run, which I hope is not the way this goes, I'm still going to be able to find joy in the joy of other people. Isn't that really ultimately what all of this is about? It's one of the best things that sports can do, is to create that kind of empathy. For a few weeks, we're going to find ourselves cheering for people we've never met from places we've never been. And at a time where so much of politics is about building walls and narrowing identities and fearing people who are different, the World Cup gives us the opportunity to do the opposite and remind us how much fun the rest of the world can be. If we're lucky, the World Cup won't just teach the rest of the world something about America. It might teach America something about the rest of the world. And on that note, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.